Art is pivotal in evoking the fantasy and storytelling essence of games, whether we're talking about video games or specifically in this video, tabletop and RPG art. It creates the vibes, right? The art is what draws players into the game world more often than the game rules and mechanics themselves. Players often modify and ignore the official rules anyway. Many engage with RPG art primarily through imagining stories, characters, and settings inspired by the game's art, even without playing formal sessions. And it was just last video I was talking about Wizards of the Coast and how they're exploiting a lot of artists and creators over the years, whether it's low pay and stagnant rates, limited rights and secondary market restrictions, to the lack of royalties and residual income they offer. This has led in turn many industry titans like Dave Raposa, Pete Mortbarker, and Donato Giannicola to leave Wizards of the Coast and to pursue their own efforts. And I don't blame them. There seems to be like a lot of downsides to that. And I know I kind of pinned the needle on Wizards of the Coast last video, but this does not entirely just entail them. This is most kind of trading card game company art that you would work for. And there's still a lot of other major challenges and hurdles that artists and creators have to go through when handling this kind of work, right? Whether that is work for hire contracts, whether that is AI and automation, or whether it's other creative restrictions and art direction. So I'd like to hit upon some of those in today's video, as well as weigh in on what you guys said on the last one. A lot of artists, both past and present, commented on the video and reached out, and I'd like to share some of the insight that I got from you guys as well. So yeah, guys, we're going to be talking some shop in this video. I did a demo for some students on environment design this week. I'm going to be playing that footage over most of the video. And of course, I'll be giving some contract tips for freelancers and illustrators toward the end. Let's get into this. And so like I had just mentioned, I previously was really kind of attacking Wizards of the Coast for this, but realistically, I think any kind of companies that are similar and that sell similar products are probably even worse than Wizards. Think of things like Disney's Lorcana, any kind of Fantasy Flight project, those kinds of companies that hire artists on a work-for-hire basis are the ones that we'd be looking at. Now, Simon Pape did run in. I believe he's a Magic the Gathering artist from Germany, and he went through some numbers and extrapolated them very conservatively, but it turns out illustrators are in total just getting paid maybe between like 0.2 and maybe 1% of any revenue given with a set. And that's kind of insane, considering how the art is the game's main kind of gateway. Like I said, it's what draws the players in, it's what markets it. And for a lot of people, it's just that unique selling point for wanting to get in and buy the product to begin with. Now, exploitations in corporations like this is very widespread and it's built into this system, right? Key factors include the shrinking wages for these workers, a focus on short-term profits over the sustainable growth, and the increased competition due to perceived declines in the Western dominance. And so since corporations aren't democratic, right, CEOs prioritize quarterly profits over long-term value or fair treatment of employees, right? And making quick financial gains is often the top priority over creating something sustainable and more ethically driven. Now, I would like to clarify a point that I did make in the last video. It is the Universes Beyond sets that has to be all digital, right? These are the ones that can't be resold because obviously ownership lies with a lot of the other companies involved, including Marvel, right, Middle-earth and Ubisoft. And the commissioning prices for Universes Beyond set is actually kind of twice as high, I was told, by about $2,500. I said in the last video they were just $1,200 even. So artists are making more, but they can't do them traditionally. They have to be digital, and there's no potential for reselling or marketing these beyond that. So you're getting one flat fee. Now, for some artists, they wrote in and they could bang these things out in as quickly as 2 days. Now, getting $2,500 for 2 days of work is not bad at all. But again, not every artist is going to be able to crank out an image, that fast. So again, are they really getting exploited? I guess that's up to the individual and their work ethic and whether or not they actually enjoy working for the company to begin with. Now let's get in a little bit about the work for hire situation, right? Many artists are hired as independent contractors under a work for hire agreement, meaning the company will retain, right, full ownership and the artist gives up control however their art is used. So this setup allows companies to reuse an artist's work without providing additional compensation and prevents artists from showcasing or profiting on them for their own creations. So this is limiting their professional growth and their financial opportunities. Again, as long as you're okay with that initial base price, because that's all you're going to get. So if Wizards of the Coast wants to market it and put it on all their boxes, put it on their posters, their promotional ads online, if they want to digitize the product, make a video game version featuring that art, you're only probably getting paid once. You're not getting anything. You're not getting any bonus on top of that base pay, no matter how much money that image makes the company. And I've heard from you guys on both sides of the aisle that work for Wizards that said, hey, like I've had no bad experiences working from them. I don't mind it at all. I love the product. I love the game. And they can do the art, reasonably within a given time frame, that it's still not completely aiding into their livelihood. Whereas, I've heard the opposite as well, where it's like, you know what, I've worked for them. They were very difficult. Their terms were just too much. Their rounds and rounds of revisions, I ended up losing money on them. So it's easy to see that, of course, depending on your relationship with the art directors and the type of art you're providing for them, your mileage, of course, may vary. My advice to any kind of artist that wants to do potentially this kind of work is that you're going to need to know how long it's probably going to take you to do an art piece, whether it's complex or simple, and of course have a simple, consistent workflow. Go from drawing, to sketching, to color layout. I've done a lot of this type of artwork in the past, not specifically for Wizards, and a lot of them have various types of stages that they want you to submit their art to so that they can guide the direction of it along the process. So as an artist, as long as you're comfortable with working with kind of like a set procedure and you can make it work with your own workflow, then I'm sure the terms would actually be pretty decent. Now, one kind of growing problem and concern within many fields and disciplines is the use of AI when it comes to creating imagery for the use of consumer products. And there is a growing sort of problem when it comes to the perspectives with the consumers and the creators when it comes to creating products for these types of games. On a large scale, Wizards of the Coast directly say that they oppose the use of it, but have been caught red-handedly using it in marketing material. They are also hiring AI engineers for who knows what. Their parent company, Hasbro, that CEO seems to be full on board with wanting to use it. But it really comes to the question as, what percentage of consumers do you think actually care how the art is made and where it comes from? I know as a younger guy, when I loved to buy Magic cards, I used to love buying it for the art, right? It was my gateway into that project, but I didn't look necessarily as to who made the art. I just really enjoyed the art. And I know, of course, with this channel, a lot of us being creators here will have a certain bias against that as well. But I wonder, what the typical consumer actually thinks and if they care about it. Let me know what you think. And then on the smaller scale, this is happening as well, with projects getting funded all the time on backer sites like Kickstarter. I constantly see projects on there getting funded, and these are filled or made up entirely with AI art. One recent one alone was Draconis 8. And to me, this is a problem itself. These crowdfunding platforms have varying AI policies. Kickstarter, for example, fully allows generative AI and the use of it in all its products if AI is disclosed. Then there's BackerKit. Its crowdfunding platform bans content solely created with generative AI. But its pledge management system services do not enforce such restrictions. There is GameFund, right? This encourages full transparency and is considering standardizing these policies a bit more with AI usage, right? So nothing too firmly to help us quite there yet. But, to make it clear, these platforms are benefiting largely when these products are successfully funded and they're entirely made up of these AI projects. And that in itself is a problem for a variety of ethical reasons. We don't need to get into that aspect of it in this video. And yes, I have talked a lot about this in the past, and AI imagery can generate technically very well detailed images, but they do fail to capture those specific emotional and narrative elements crucial, for a lot of role-playing art. So overall, I take the output as something that looks very derivative and generic, and it has an inability to compose meaningful and story-driven visuals, the very thing that hook us, the viewer and the audience, into the game to begin with. But yeah, hopefully some form of standardized legislation will be made and help to protect artists and creators and, be implemented on these kinds of platforms. So typically, right, when you're working on a contracted illustration like a magic card, you're going to get a description or the brief, right, for what the content of that card is. And I've had a few you guys write in and say 90% of that information now, especially when it comes to the character cards, have been lists of ethnicities to include, and these are fantasy races and things like sexual identities, as if these were, basically a visual characteristic on creatures like orcs and goblins and dragonborns, all these things. And they would get multiple rounds of feedback because a female character didn't look in charge enough, or a male was too masculine or serious and needed to look more like a happy-go-lucky little teenager, even though that initial brief said the opposite. And some of these people have said it's become a nightmare to work with them, and that artists should stop idolizing the company, and they were not what they were in the 2010s and earlier. So yeah, I've heard a lot of mixed reports on this. Again, I can't speak specifically from that, though it doesn't surprise me in the slightest. And yeah, I have previously shared my concerns about how an overemphasis on DEI in creative works can sometimes feel counterproductive. For example, reimagining classic fantasy characters in ways that contradict established lore, or the consistency of a setting that might feel too forced. And while inclusion is important, it can certainly come across as inauthentic or superficial when it's not integrated naturally into the narrative or the world building. But yeah, it certainly seems like it's made its way in a small capacity to a card game like Magic the Gathering for sure. Now, I just want to actually take a moment here to get into a bunch of types of contracts and some pros and cons when working. So if you're a artist or an art student, and if you're looking to understand some of the terms and what to kind of look for, this next section might be a little bit helpful for you. Right, so illustrators are typically encounter several types of contracts. Let's start with the work for hire contracts. I think these are typically the most common. So, the pros, right, provides guaranteed payment, often higher up front, since the client will own all the right to the artwork, and less ongoing responsibility, for basically both parties. Sometimes it includes certain types of credits. Now, for the cons, we the artists, are going to forfeit all ownership and future earnings of this work, including reproductions or adaptations. There's just very little to no control over, and most of the time it's no control over how that art is used, potentially limiting, creative recognition in the long run. Now, I actually get asked about this one quite frequently, and that's licensing contracts. With a licensing contract, an artist is going to retain ownership and basically license that art for a specific use, whether that's like print, digital media, and potentially that earning income through royalties or renewals, right? There's a bit more flexibility here to reuse and repurpose the artwork for different projects or licenses. Now, the cons of this is that it requires a bit more negotiation and to specify the usage of those rights, the territories, and the duration and length for which those can go on. And that can lead to complex legal stipulations. It's not the easiest type of contract to negotiate and navigate through. So generally with these, of course, that initial payment might be lower up front, and that could depend upon those potential royalties. So for example, when I used to do a lot of these kinds of private illustration commissions, I used to set the terms for basically I own the rights. I'm going to license this image for you for your book cover. You can run it on as many of your own posters and covers for 1 year. If you want to reuse it and reprint it again, then we're going to talk again in a year and sign another contract that'll allow us to kind of continue this relationship. Now, with that, we could also take that a step further and negotiate things a bit further, saying like, look, I see you don't have a very big budget, right? You're very indie. I'll do this for you for less, but I want to take 10% on top of the income from that. So see, there's a lot of back and forth that could potentially be involved with certain kinds of contracts. There are also royalty-based contracts, right? Artists can earn a portion based of sales over time. This is what I was just talking about. So this can make it very lucrative if the product or project is very successful, right? And it can, of course, lead to long-term income and the artist's work gaining more widespread recognition. Of course, the cons with this is that there is no guaranteed income at the start, and the payment depends on the product sales. This is what a lot of people approach me with. Hey, I'm going to launch a project. I can't pay you for it, but if we succeed, you can get like 15% of this. So you're basically doing the work all up front for free. I'm sure a lot of you guys see these kinds of emails with the potential of revenue sharing. I personally avoid these like the plague, but if nobody else has anything going on and you just want to try to get some experience, maybe it's not the worst scenario for you. But again, something like this is going to require detailed tracking and reporting by the client. You want to find a way to make sure you're not getting stiffed. And then there is a perpetual use contract, right? This is an agreement that grants one party the right to use certain assets. So unlike a license with a defined expiration date, a perpetual use contract does not require renewal and typically lasts forever unless otherwise specified. So the difference between a perpetual use contract and a work for hire agreement lies in ownership and nature of the relationship between the parties. So for example, a perpetual license to use a graphic design for marketing purposes while the designer retains the copyright. So a perpetual use contract focuses more on licensing while a work for hire focuses on ownership transfer. Then there's the one-time use or limited license. This allows an artist to sell usage rights for a single project, like one book cover or a campaign, while retaining the option to resell for other uses. You can maximize your income by licensing the same artwork to multiple clients across non-competing uses. The downside of this is that it may offer lower fees, right, compared to exclusive or perpetual contracts, as the client has the limited rights, as the client only has limited rights. Now, this requires careful tracking and usage rights to avoid conflicts between the clients. So basically, each contract type suits different goals, right? Work for hire is ideal for a secure one-time payment. Licensing work works really great for maintaining long-term rights, and royalty-based contracts can maximize potential income over time. And this is why it's a bit tricky, right? We're always navigating these waters of like, okay, well, what's financially fair? What's going to balance me the most amount of rights versus no rights and using the artwork, right? There's a lot of things to consider. Now, I know I just laid out a lot of information, so I'd like to provide now just a brief list of resources that you guys can check out to help you negotiate your terms and your contracts with your prospective clients. One of my favorite go-tos is the Art Pack at artistify.com. Again, I'll have links below for all these, but it's a great tool to help, freelance artists, and it basically has lots of examples of contracts, glossaries of terms, just different articles and templates that you guys can use to help navigate, being a freelancer, essentially. There's another site called Art Professor, which is a free resource with guidance of how to spot red flags in contracts, right? Negotiating terms and to protect your rights. So again, this one includes sample documents like commissioning contracts and invoicing. And another one is Freelancers Union, right? Offers free contract templates tailored for freelancers, including artists, and their contracts cover important topics like intellectual property, payment terms, and the scope of work. Guys, thank you for watching this video. Let me know what topics you want to hear about more. Let me know if there's something I can clarify or even make a follow-up video on this to help you guys on your art and freelance journey with. Till then, links below for everything you need, and I'll catch you in the next video.